Okay, great.
And
Well,
we are recording.
so thank you for inviting me.
Of
Or
course.
not, don't know. So Andrea and I have put together this social and emotional support for gifted children. And feel free to post questions in the chat. Or you can unmute at any time and yell out something. I will try to answer that. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end. I made things really simple. So it's a very simple slideshow. It's only got 15 slides. I've been overwhelmed with all kinds of information for social emotional, as well as how to extend curriculum for GT kids. So much so that when I see something come in, I just delete it. It'd be easier to do something super. I'm muted now, it says.
You're not muted, you're fine.
All right. But this wonderful thing came up that said I was. Okay. So here's what we're going to do today. All right. We're going to do an overview talking about why GT kids need support, and then about you putting on your life vests first, and then some simple things that you can do with kids and a few selected resources. I should say, I didn't introduce myself. It's interesting to look at the people who are in the video feed, because these are all people that, well, I recognize about, I guess, 10% of you. So my name is Sue Boyce Cormier. I'm currently president of MEGAT, the Maine Educators of the Gifted and Talented. I am also a adjunct faculty member at UMF, where I teach some of the grad classes you need to be gifted and talented endorsed. I also am a consultant, and I work part-time in MSAD 58, which is Kingfield. I have about 30 years experience teaching, a little bit over that actually. And GT is not the only thing I've taught. You'll hear me make references. I've also taught music, was the first thing I taught, K to 12. I taught art K to 12. I've taught second grade for a number of years, and then GT. And at one point I was doing 3 of those at the same time. So here's our overview, and we're off. It's not moving. Well, that's interesting.
Try clicking on the slide itself. Just click on the slide.
Yeah, I was doing that. Let me try to get it in a different spot. There we go, in a different spot. Yay. Why GT kids need support. So those of you who've taken those grad classes, and I assume most of you had, will recognize overexcitabilities. That's Dabrowski's little realm. And our kids tend to have overexcitabilities. And you need to remember that they can be sensory, psychomotor, intellectual, imaginational, or emotional. So Dabrowski was the guy who came up with the overexcitabilities, and then he expanded it. And for those of you who, don't remember this, a little refresher, the sensory overexcitability, that's your kid who can't stand the tag in the back of his shirt, or who can't do anything if there's a smell in the room. Your psychomotor is your kid who's a tapper, or possibly diagnosed also with ADHD. Your intellectual is your overthinker. So a good example of the intellectuals, I have a student in the district I work in now, who way back when the coronavirus first came out, she was really uptight and scared. And she was telling me, oh, it's going to come to the United States because so many people come from China to the United States, and it'll be in Maine, and we might not even have school. And all the kids laughed at her, and look what happened. Your imaginational is your kid who lives in a fantasy world. We have some kids who think they're cats or other things like that, or their whole world revolves around Harry Potter. And then your emotional overexcitability, that would be your crier, the one who cries at the drop of a hat. So another reason that our GT kids need support emotional and social needs is because of asynchronous development. So when your brain is so advanced, there's often a difference in development, which means that your kid might be in 3rd grade, read at a 6th or 7th grade reading level, but emotionally they're a 2nd grader. And so they can read things way ahead of their time, and they get overexcited about it, or they get anxious about it. And it's not written for the psyche of a 3rd grader. And then perfectionism, which can go too far. If you take in my class, we go into this a lot. I have some students who, when they see perfectionism, say, well, we want our kids to be perfect and strive for perfection. And as you probably know, perfectionism means they overstrive to the point that it can be crippling, like they don't get things done, or they won't try anything new. And I would say perfectionism is also hand in hand with control. So sometimes these are the kids who have to be in control of everything. So they're in control of the room, or at least they think so. They're in control of what they take, how much effort they put into it. And right now in a pandemic situation, they're out of control. So it's a little scary to them. All right, little disclaimer, I put in something pretty because I like it.
We had a couple of comments on your last slide in the chat. One of which being that the overexcitability can also happen with things like fire alarms or anticipating fire alarms that may or may not come, and the heightened anxiety that can come from anticipating these things that are uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I first met my husband, he was a principal, and he used to take all of the kindergartners into his office and let them each press the fire alarm once. It was a really horrible day for the rest of us, but it did alleviate some of that anxiety. And you're right, that's another area. And our kids tend to be just oversensitive like that. So going on to being a role model, we're going to start with the fact that anytime you see a photo, it's something that I took, and some of you know where I took this, but you can't, I use the term life vest. They always tell you to put on your mask first, and I can't stress this enough, because GT kids tend to be overly sensitive, right? So they're really sensitive to the emotions in the room sometimes. And if you're really upset and uptight and you're flitting around, they will feed right off of that like a guppy in a bowl. So you need to stay calm and assure them that everything's going to be okay. You need to find your own rhythm. Find a schedule that works for you. Find joy in things. As some of you know, I'm also a mindfulness meditation teacher. And you know, those things really work. Finding gratitude, helping others. These are all things that can really, really help. I recently saw a presentation, and I have a link to one of these in the resources, by Christine Fonseca. And she writes books more or less specifically for advanced learners, GT kids, and their emotions. And she described the idea of a hula hoop. So think about, there's a hula hoop that goes over your head and then drops, and it's on the ground. And everything in the hula hoop is what you can control. You can control. But everything outside of the hula hoop, which is the vast majority of things, is all stuff you can't control. So I think it's a good image to keep in mind, and it has worked with some kids that I've talked to. So it's a thought. So the bottom line here is that you need to get your act together before you try getting your kids' acts together. Now, here are some things that you can do with children. The most important thing is checking in with them. So everything that's currently out on social emotional needs, on pandemic reactions, is all saying the most important thing is the human connection to checking in. So one of the things that they ask you to do is to see how your kids are doing. And I will tell you from working a lot with middle schoolers, you don't ask a middle schooler, how's everything going? Because they will say, fine. Just like if you ask them, what'd you learn in school today? If you happen to own one, they will say nothing. So a better question is the first one I posed here, which is, what's the best and worst part of this pandemic business? So you should get a best and worst part. Now we all know that particularly middle schoolers will say there is no good part. It all sucks. And so you need to, dig into that with, okay, everything sucks, but of all those things, which sucks the least? Because you need to get at what's going on. The other thing I would ask in checking in is, do you need anything? And before you ask this question, you need to know the answers. So do you need any food? Many schools are supplying lunches. Many food banks in the area are doing something that is non-contact. Do they need books? You should know if they can get books from school, if they can get books from you, if they can get books from somewhere else. You can hitch them up with books that are Audible has a whole bunch of books that are on tape that are free right now to kids. And do they need supplies? I know in my school district, this is something we check with because we are able to send them pencils and paper and other things if they need it. I would also share your own personal joy with them. So ask them what they have to be grateful about. And we know that some of them are just Debbie Downers and they don't have anything to be grateful about, but start with what you're grateful about. What have you learned? One thing I've learned is that I can wear a t-shirt and shorts every day. And if I just throw a scarf on, it looks okay on Zoom. So it doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be something little. Another thing would be to be a little flexible. If you have kids who you normally have to push quite hard because they're underachievers or they're not motivated, perhaps now is not the time to really push hard. You will have to decide that with your kids. You'll have to decide what seems like a good idea and what might be pushing them over edge, because their line right now may not be in the same place it was when they were in school. It might be a little closer. And then the last thing that I would say about checking in with kids is to do something where you stay in touch with them. So even if that means you send one email over the summer, or it means that if you don't hear from when school starts again, or for the rest of the year, if you don't hear from them, that you try to stay in touch with what's going on so that they know that you are there for them. And you need to remember that some kids, this is a really good experience for them. And for other kids, this is the worst experience for them. Just like with teachers. I find the same thing with teachers now. So another thing I would recommend, a more specific thing, is journaling. And journaling with a purpose. We all know that GT kids in particular need a purpose to do their work. In the first paragraph, I said that we are in a unique point in history. And what you chronicle will be a primary source for somebody's National History Day project in the future. Oh, gee, I should have capitalized D in day. My bad. So if your kids do National History Day, they know how important a primary source is, particularly a journal or a diary. And I would have your kids keep one if you feel like it. A cool thing to do would be to say, when we come back to school in the fall, or when we are next together, we're going to put together a book of all your experiences, or we're going to put together a newsletter with all your experiences. And it could be something that's saved. And this has a dual purpose. It also helps somebody, and it helps the child by thinking positively of the future. So if they think that by writing down what they're doing, or a fun story or a poem about what's going on presently will help somebody in the future, then they're more likely to do it. And once again, you know, I talked to you about for your own self to keeping a routine and getting a schedule. Kids need that too. And some kids just naturally fall into it and others do not. And what I would do is not ask the kids, do you have a schedule? Because they're apt to say, yep, or nope. But maybe asking them what their day looks like. So what does your day look like? Yesterday, I talked to a fifth grader and I said, so what does your day look like? What do you do when you get up in the morning? And they had a pretty good schedule. It was a way of checking on her schedule. I checked with another kid who said, well, you know, I can't seem to get any of my work done for school because I get distracted and I have the dog, and then I look around and I see games and I want to play them. And so we kind of worked out something that he could do that wasn't quite so scheduled, which is just after, like you're going to get up and eat, and then after you have breakfast, whatever time that is, that's when you check in with your email and try to get things done by noontime. So I would try to encourage some structure. And one of the ways you might do that is share what your structure is. What do you do? If you've had me in class, you know I'm the Post-it queen. So I have a whole Post-it system that I use. Some people make lists. Some people put them on their fridge, but gently suggesting something that they might do that would help them. I know a teacher in Maine who is having kids email her a smiley face when they have their stuff done for the day. So it's whatever works for that kid, but try to help them create a routine without having a rigid schedule. Mindfulness. So some of you are going to recognize this slide, which, yes, I took. It's a real building. It has tentacles coming out of it. I love this slide when I talk about mindfulness, when I teach mindfulness classes, because this reminds me of my own brain. 18th century facade, look old on the outside, raging monster on the inside, trying to escape all the time. And with mindfulness, you want to be careful that you do things that are authentic to you. So if you don't practice mindfulness, you might just start with talking to kids about, let's just be quiet and breathe gently for 60 seconds before we start. Now, ultimately, it would have been nice if that's something you do during your regular GT classes or when you meet with kids. This is something I do with the kids, and I only do a minute because I find in my situation, kids come to me and they're still talking about what happened on the playground and all that kind of stuff. And so we just have 60 seconds of silence. This is a strategy that works for me. But you might find something else, and you might do some of those cool acronyms for, you know, waiting and evaluating the situation and stuff like that. I did find this article, which I really liked, because it's 25, this is linked at the end, 25 mindfulness activities. And what I liked about it was organized by age. So this is kind of a synopsis of this article. It tells you 4 mindfulness activities and exercises for children in general, 15 tips for mindfulness to kids and teenagers, which is a whole different realm, 8 games and YouTube videos, 3 mindfulness training classes for children with anxiety, some basics, some mindfulness meditations for very young, that's preschool, kindergarten, the benefits of mindfulness to schools, and other things and references. But I just thought it was pretty good in terms of showing you different things that you could do. And once again, I have this article tagged at the end if you're interested in it. I'm not obviously going to read it to you. Another thing to remember with mindfulness and with our kids and in this pandemic is knowledge is power. It is particularly powerful for gifted kids because knowledge is something and learning is something they're good at. And so you're going to teach them whatever you teach through their strength. So if you have to be careful too, to make sure that you're doing things that are appropriate for your kids and their age groups and that sort of thing. So for example, I'm afraid of snakes. I've always been afraid of snakes. I don't like the way they move. I understand some of you adore snakes. That's awesome for you. But I don't like snakes. And one of the ways that I deal with that is that that's my cat, is that I go on and have really found out a lot about them. And it really helps with that. So if your kid is really uptight about the pandemic and about viruses in general, please help them find accurate information. If they see it on Facebook, we all know it doesn't mean it's accurate. Tell them what you do. Do you go to the CDC? What websites do you do? And remember that they can read far above what they can emotionally digest. So if you can find them age appropriate material about the pandemic or things like that, that would be really good for them. This would also include why they may be upset or uneasy. And it may include how the brain works. And with that, I shift to Andrea.
I'll add on to what you were saying about your fear of snakes. I spent a very, very large portion of my life irrationally afraid of bees. I do not have a reason to be afraid of bees. I don't even have an allergy or anything like that, but there was something about the combination of the yellow and black that just really used to set me off. And I mean, as a kid, it would paralyze me, terrified to go outside, terrified to go on nature walks or hikes or find myself in any kind of situation where there might be bees. And I mean, even in the very early ages of my kids' lives, I would be just, completely, bonkers if a bee would come near us or come around us. And it was terrible. And it wasn't until I watched the Bee movie, if anybody has seen the Bee movie, and I learned about how bees help the earth and how integral they are for, healthy ecosystems and pollination and keeping the world green and beautiful. I completely changed my mindset about bees. And now I have done the work of trying to figure out how to relax when there are bees around. And even just this weekend, we were hiking and there was up on the tablelands where we were hiking, not the tablelands, but near the top. And there were some bees zooming around. And even just 10 years ago, that would have completely paralyzed me and I would have had to have gone down and not continued on my hike. But the knowledge is power piece is huge because it really leads us into what we're going to talk about next in terms about thoughts driving emotions. But just kind of laughing at your snake story because I have a similar one that really dominated my life for a very long time. So thanks for sharing that, Sue. So thoughts drive emotions and emotions drive actions. That's what we're going to talk about. And it's a very nice way to wrap up that knowledge is power piece. If you take a look at the brain is amazing slide over here, this picture over here on the left, this is really just a quick mock-up of where of the two different parts of our brain that really help drive the way that we act and the way that we behave. And if we could go back to, there we go. And so we have the different areas of the brain that really control those thoughts and those emotions. And so the protecting brain is the one that is in the real, that's the amygdala, right? And it's centered, really at the top of that brain stem. It looks like it's in the center, but it's actually, situated in the center, but also at the very top of that spine, that brain stem that comes up that we can't see. And then our protecting brain is the one that gears in when we have an irrational fear about something, or when we have a situation where we are thinking about something or we're worried about something, our brain will tighten right up and go into that protecting brain. And then when we're able to really think through something, and our thinking brain and our emotional brain, those two things will work together when we can think through one of our problems. And it's those thinking strategies that we have that will drive the emotions that we feel. And it's those emotions that we feel that actually drive our actions. And so oftentimes we think that it's the things that we think that are going to drive our actions, but it's actually the things that we think that cause us to have an emotional response or have a feeling about something. And it's those feelings that actually drive those actions. Next slide, please. So thoughts drive emotions and emotions drive actions. And one way that we like to explain that to kids is through the use of TFAR, and that's thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. So if you take a look at the graphic, it'll show that something happens, some situation will happen, and it can be something really big, like a pandemic, or it can be something really small, like your pencil breaking, right? It can be anything. But in this situation, there's a circumstance, something that has happened, and that's going to set your thinking brain off and what you think about this situation, okay? And then in that thinking moment, that's going to create the emotion that you feel. Now, if those thoughts drive you to feel very frustrated or very scared or very anxious, those feelings are the ones that are going to drive what you wind up doing. And so for our students, and even for us as adults, it's that emotional response where we have our brain kind of has a choice to make. We can act in a way that is being driven by emotions that are negative and behave in a way that allows us, that makes us withdraw or makes us move forward or makes us procrastinate or any of those other kinds of actions that can come along with those feelings. Or we can learn to identify those feelings and then head back into our thinking brain and then change our thinking about that situation. And so this is important, especially in these times, because when kids are thinking about school, they might feel nervous or anxious. When kids are thinking about what the fall is going to look like, they may feel nervous or anxious. Like Sue was saying earlier, some kids really think that this situation is great for them and it makes them feel good. And so they're more apt to go out and do more positive things or to have more positive outcomes. And so really helping a kid or a student that you're working with, either one-on-one or in small groups, really help to shape their thinking. It's their thoughts that are going to help them to get the actions that they want, because it will create the feelings that they need to drive those actions forward so that they can ultimately get results.
Are we good?
We're good.
Hey. So first of all, Andrea, I think you and I are never going on a picnic together, because there will be bees and snakes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's not going to happen, but we can talk about it.
So another thing you can do with your kids is to help others. I put up a quote by Will Smith because he's such an unlikely person to have a quote about this. And some of my kids are really into Will Smith. So if you're not making someone else's life better, you are wasting your time. Your life will be better by making others' lives better. Okay, it's not great English, but it is Will Smith. And so I use that as an example in that there are a lot of kids doing some really interesting things during this pandemic, and it doesn't have to be helping others. Yeah, you could go and do groceries for your elderly neighbor. There are things that you can do locally, but it helps you ultimately. And the example I was going to use for that is, Andrea doesn't like bees. I don't like snakes. My daughter is pathologically afraid of both spiders. We make a great trio. And flying. And she had to fly a lot for her job initially. And one of the things that she said that really helped her is that she even takes medication when she flies, is she'll get on the plane and then she looks for someone who looks more scared than she is. And she tries to sit with them. Because if she can help somebody feel better on the plane, ultimately it helps her and it relaxes her because she realizes that she has to be calm in order to help somebody else. And then she gets off the plane feeling really good about it. But your kid doesn't have to help somebody, it doesn't have to be a person they help either in that sense. I noticed in the chat that I think it was Charlotte mentioned the bee girl. Those of you who went to MEGAD a few years ago, the Student of the Year did a presentation on bees, and I too still remember that presentation. Her passion was helping the bees. You can help bees, you can help whales, your kid can help save the planet. I mean, recycling seems a little interesting now, but whatever it is that it will help somebody else, it takes your mind off of you. And that's why you do it, and also for the good feelings you get from helping other people. A lot of you might recognize this slide. I usually use this slide for perfectionism because I think it's the perfect example. Those of you who don't know what this is, it's the Winged Victory. It sits in the Louvre. It's probably, oh gee, I'm getting goosebumps over that. I'm not kidding. It's the most beautiful statue I've ever seen in my entire life. And the reason that this is the most beautiful statue, in my opinion, is that if you look at, she's on the bow of a ship, standing at the bow of a ship. And if you look at the bottom, you can see her skirt, and it looks like it is made out of the lightest fabric possible, and it's blowing in the wind. And it's larger than life, so it's bigger than a real person would be. And I use this when I talk about perfectionism because it's probably the most perfect statue in the world, in my opinion, because I can't help thinking, how does somebody make solid rock look soft and move and put movement into it? But the other thing is, it doesn't have a head. So it's beautiful and it's functional and it serves its purpose, but it's not perfect. And I want you to understand that no one has the perfect formula. We're all discovering this together. And it doesn't have to be perfect. What you do for kids does not have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You try to be effective. And just by trying, you're doing something more than sitting still, and that's a positive. So don't beat yourself up over what you can't do. Concentrate on the little things. If you take anything from this presentation, what I want you to take from it is that you can do one little thing to help those kids' lives. And those of you who teach gifted and talented know that we have a fragile population that we deal with. And so I'd like to thank you for everything that you do every day to make their lives better. And just remember, anything counts. So can I just go over the resources?
Well, actually, I was just going to add on to Charlotte offered to the group that her motto is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, which I thought
Well, I love
really
that.
fit with that perfectionism piece. And I remember having a student very recently where, in the middle of a parent-teacher conference, I had been struggling with this child's perfectionism a little bit and really trying to help them, build a bridge and overcome some of those feelings. And her mom came in and said, yeah, we learned a long time ago that we needed to remind her that perfection is not the goal, and that there are other goals that you can set to help you to feel good about the things that you're doing. And perfection doesn't have to be one of those goals. And moving on through the rest of the time that I had with that student, every time she would get into that perfectionism mode, I would say to her, remember, perfection is not the goal. And it would just allow her to stop and think for just a few minutes about how she could reframe those thoughts about what she was doing. And it was really powerful.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Whatever we can do with kids, that helps them realize that it's the struggle, you know, all that Carol Dweck stuff. It's the struggle, not the end result. So we praise them up for giving it a try. So you're not good at soccer. Okay, you learned something. You're not good at soccer, or you don't like it. So I think those are all really, really valid things. So this is my last slide, and these are some resources for teachers. And I just wanted to explain it. Like I said, I tried to cull everything down so it was super simple and just easy things. The first one is the Teen Text Support Line from NAMI. This is a number that is hosted by actual teens from noon until 10 p.m., perfect for their lifestyle. And they can call and talk to another teen about what's going on in their lives right now, things that they need help with. If you're not familiar with NAMI, it's the National Association for Mental Illness or something close to that. If you're very interested, and you can go on their website, and they sponsor a free training. Some of you have probably taken basic first aid. They do a first aid for mental health, which is very, and they have one for teens. It's a really good resource, and they will come to your school and do it for your staff if you want. It's a one-day training, probably a couple of hours. And that's a really good resource for your kids to have. And one of the things you learn in that class, by the way, is that you don't have to have all the answers, but it helps to have places you can refer students to so that they know where they can go for help. You're not diagnosing their problems. You're just helping them find something they need. Then I only put in one article because I know people say they don't want to have a list of articles. But if you're going to read one, this is by NAGC, and it addresses anxiety at different age levels. It's pretty short too. 3 videos. The first one is 10 minutes. I put the time on because that means something to me. May not be helpful to you, but I like knowing the time up ahead. And it's a psychologist, and it's aimed at parents with tips for dealing with their gifted kid during the pandemic specifically. The second one is about 20 minutes, might be more for you, but it's 3 good tips in dealing with gifted children during any stressful time. And the last one is what I referenced a little bit before, which is Christine Fonseca. And she did a webinar with the Texas Gifted Association. And this would be mainly for you because it's 35 minutes long, but it talks about kids and trauma. And then the last one I separated at the bottom, and that's a mindfulness, that's the 25 mindfulness activities that I referenced during the program. So this comes to the end of things that I have prepared.
We've had a question in the chat about whether folks will receive a link to this slideshow.
Do you want me to do that?
I mean, I think that it would be great if I could send out a link to the recording as well as the slides so that folks can have the clickable pieces, and then they can use slides in the future if they need it.
Okay, will do. I'll talk to you later about that. I'd love to hear if anybody has any other ideas of things they've done. I'm not the end all be all. I like to steal from other people too. So if you feel like you have a comment or something that you could add or a question, feel free to unmic yourself and jump right in there. Oh, it's so quiet.
I'll say something, which is huge thanks to both of you, and especially Sue for emphasizing both the fragility and the strength of our population, because it's really been, as a teacher for me, these past few, 1,000 years, that it's been a real dance for each kid, for each group, honoring both the fragility and the strength and figuring out very different paths for very different kids. It's been differentiation on steroids.
I agree.
I know for my students, we do Google Meets, and I ask them to just write reflections of how they feel about school being closed. And then when we meet, we can talk about it. And I asked them to just have something prepared. But, we're wrapping up school next week. And I have a few students in particular who are really nervous about summer because we've been closed since March and now summer's going to be here. So, I just told them, email me, we can do a Google Meets over the summer. Sometimes I find that they just need to be validated, their feelings and their anxieties about the pandemic, especially, but even at other times, just need to be validated. And they just need to have someone, like Sue was saying, a calming voice, a calming presence, a listener that says, it's okay to feel like that and let's take a breath. So I think it's going to be very important for these kiddos to keep that connection somehow through the summer, because we don't even know what September is going to look like. And we could really lose a lot of them if we don't keep that connection.
This is Michelle Motto. I turned my video off because I think thank you for that tip, by the way. I didn't realize that I was taking up more bandwidth when I kept my video on. But so I want to first also say thank you very much for this. It's really helped me. One of the things that I find, speaking of the fragilities and the strengths with my students in our Zoom meetings, is that additionally we have the fast thinkers and the slow thinkers. And when I'm in my classroom, which in some cases I work in a school system where I have multiple schools. In some cases where I have the ability to do small pullouts, we have the chance to say, like, okay, risk taking, people only get stickers if they actually take a risk and are wrong. So nobody gets a gold star for being right, because that's pretty easy to be right. It's actually the being wrong that is hard. So that helps to reinforce that when we're in real time. We've tried to continue that, although it's hard in the Zoom context, like with clapping for someone if they take a risk. And the thing also that we've tried to work on is that the fast thinkers and the slow thinkers, that we want to share the air. And on Zoom, that's been something that's been a little bit easier to help them understand, I think. So we had a conversation just today with our third grade math students that how much we respect our fast thinkers in the group, and if there was actually someone on the moon that we had to get back very quickly, we would want all those fast thinkers like throwing the ideas down, but that because we are not in a crisis at this time, that we want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak. So there have been so many things that have been positive about learning to teach using Zoom and the digital tools that we're using. I think that's been one of them for us, is that we've had a chance to kind of really examine our slow thinking and our fast thinking, as well as our our fragility and our strength and our risk taking. So that was just something else I wanted to add. And I just want to really say thank you for doing this. It means a lot to have a chance to connect with all the GT teachers around the state. It really helps me in my own fragility, trying to take care of myself, to know that others are sort of in the same place. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Other thoughts? In the chat, I put my email address. If you would like a copy of the slides, I can give you a direct link. That way, if you'd send it to the university address, that would be really helpful, because I'd like them all in one spot.
We'll also be sending out, I will send out the link to the recording. Once what I'll do is I'll send it out to the registration list, so that everybody that got a registration link can have, can get the recording. And then folks can ask for it later if they need it again, or know somebody that they could share it with. But we'll start with the registration people, which was about 63, but we've only gotten, I think only about half showed up, but that's okay. We have it for them if they want it.
I'm also putting in the chat that our unconference is June 16th, us meaning MEGATs. It's free, it's online. It's 9 to 12. So check the MEGAT website, which is megat.org, if you are interested in that. Those of you who are interested, if you usually go to our fall conference, it will probably be a virtual conference, and it's going to be free this year so that you can access that. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, I'd like to thank you all. Since we couldn't get on until 10, I really wanted to make sure we got off like by 10:55 to allow the next person who's using Zoom to get on. Because
Yeah, we share this account, and so because in order to get enough capacity for the number of people and the features of Zoom and things like that, being able to do co-hosts and all those kinds of things, and so sometimes those meetings butt right up against each other, and you can't. Even then, I had to end the other meeting because I kept getting a signal that says, if you push this, it will end the other meeting. And I thought to myself, oh, I hope they're not running over. I hope they're not running over. So I let it go. A few minutes passed, and I haven't got any emails that said, hey, you cut my meeting off. So hopefully it's been okay.
well, that's why I was kind of thinking that we should make sure that we wrap up in time, that if somebody's going to start, they can, and they can have a waiting room. Any last thoughts, people?
One thing I will say before we end, Sue, is if folks have a need that we haven't addressed yet in terms of helping to serve our community and our students and our teachers, just don't hesitate to send out an email to me. I can drop my email in the chat, or I know if you sent it to Sue, she would be happy to pass it along. But if you have a need that's coming up and you would really like to have some discussion on it, or some opportunity, it's nice to have an idea of what the thoughts are out there, so that when we produce something, so that when we all come together, it can be really targeted to what what's been on your mind or on your heart. And so let us know, and we'll do what we can to put something together and offer more sessions like this that are targeted to whatever it is that is going on out there that you feel like you need support with.
And Andrea, is that the gt.doe address that you're going to put down, or your own address?
Nope, that's my own address. I do monitor the GTDOE email inbox at this point, but I can say that, given all of my responsibilities, I check my Andrea.Logan every day, multiple times a day, whereas I might not check the GT inbox until maybe
Whoops, you got muted.
yeah, sorry. Whereas I might only check the GT inbox maybe every other day at this point, like, at this point in time. So if you want a direct line to me, the Andrea.Logan is best.
Great. Well, thank you once again, everybody, for clicking in. And just remember, you're doing a really important job. So keep it up. And I look forward to talking to some of you later. Feel free to drop an email if you want. Bye-bye. Lower right-hand corner. For those of you who are searching.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting. Have a great day.